The name Andrei Chikatilo is familiar to anyone interested in the criminal history of the Soviet Union. Even 30 years after his death, he remains the most notorious maniac in the post-Soviet space. And while screenwriters and authors are inspired by his personality to write thrillers and detective stories, other criminals see Chikatilo as their idol and dream of surpassing him. 25 years of criminal activity, 80 victims, 11 innocently convicted, one of whom was sentenced to execution. Such is the brief biography of Sergei Tkach, the Pavlograd and Pologovsky maniac who called himself a beast in human form. The text was written exclusively for the Strashnota channel. Sergei Tkach was born in the city of Kiselevsky, Kemerovo region, in 1952. Being the fourth child in a miner's family, the boy hardly ever experienced affection and was not attached to his parents. His father frequently drank after work, and when drunk he would often beat his wife and children. He did this even when he was sober, for the slightest fault, for disobedience, or for being slow. Sergei was a sickly and weak boy, and he was punished for that as well. That was precisely his motivation to start weightlifting. Sergei trained hard and even became the junior champion of his hometown, but he got injured and was forced to give up his dreams of sports. He took the shattering of his hopes hard, but it was only the first in his life. After school, Sergei Tkach joined the army and served in the Navy on the Laptov Sea, where he was involved in aerial photography. The young man really enjoyed his naval service and he decided to tie his life to it. But it didn't work out here either. During his medical exam, Tkach was diagnosed with a heart condition but completed his mandatory service. Here his health was sufficient, but he had to forget about a career as a sailor. Tkach's sense of injustice and resentment was so deep that he tried to take his own life. The doctors managed to save the young man, but his military service was also over. The unstable guy was discharged to shore. Tkach spent some time in Tixi, where he had served. He feared returning home, knowing his father would mock and beat him, declaring he never expected anything good from a son like him. For several days Tkach drank heavily, but alcohol only dulled the pain. He needed to think about how to go on living. To earn some money right there in Tixi, Sergei Tkach got a job with the dog catching service. The service was engaged in shooting stray animals, whose skins were then sold to dealers. According to Tkach himself, his partners were somewhat disturbed by the fact that he used a knife to kill the dogs instead of a gun. But he did his job well and they put up with this oddity. He returned home a year and a half later and got a job at the police department. Sergei Tkach soon began studying at the Novosibirsk Special Police School of the Ministry of Internal Affairs while working as a forensic expert at the Kemerovo District Police Department. Talented and smart, within 6 months, Tkach earned a promotion and a raise. It seemed that the road to success was open for the young specialist, but in 1979 he was caught falsifying the results of an expert examination and was fired. Having lost the opportunity to continue his studies at the university and to join the party, Tkach once again felt that his future life had no meaning. He started drinking again, and now alcohol only fueled the smoldering anger inside him, which he took out on his family. At that time, Tkach was married to Natalia Stava and had 2 small children. Shortly after he was fired, the marriage fell apart. Alcohol also played its part here. After he was fired, scandals in the Tkach family became constant. The spouses didn't get along, Natalia threatened with divorce, and separation was only a matter of time. As Tkach himself told journalists, one day when he came home, he found a half-naked man in his one-room apartment. Tkach kicked the lover down the stairs, then packed his things and the belongings of one of his sons and went to Crimea. A couple of years earlier, his parents had moved there. A few days later, Natalia showed up there demanding that he give her the child. Tkach had no plans to return her son or go back to Kiselevsk himself, which he openly stated. Then Natalia resorted to cunning. She pretended to agree to leave the child with his father, and she asked for just one thing, to bring him to the Simferopol airport so she could say goodbye to him there. At the airport, police met Tkach. Natalia and the child flew to Kiselevsk, while Tkach was detained at the station for 3 days. After leaving, the first thing he did was get drunk. Going out for a walk to clear his mind and deal with the feeling of injustice and resentment, Tkach noticed an attractive young woman walking alone toward the park. Without thinking about anything like that yet, he followed her. When there were no passers-by around, he attacked the girl from behind and gripped her neck tightly with his strong fingers. Dragging the victim into the park, Tkach waited until she stopped struggling, then he pinned her down and assaulted her. According to him, at that moment his mind was shrouded in a thick fog and he didn't fully grasp his actions. When it cleared, the criminal realized that he had taken a person's life. Still in shock from what had happened, Tkach made his way to the nearest payphone and dialed the number of the local police department. "I've committed a crime," he said, naming where he left the body. The officer on duty who answered the call didn't believe Tkach's straightforward confession, prompting Tkach to hang up. Soon after, he committed several more similar crimes. In total, between 1980 and 1982, he took the lives of 5 girls and young women. In 1983, the future maniac decided to move to the city of Pavlograd in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Moreover, he had just met a beautiful girl from this city and a romance began between them. Soon after moving, Tkach proposed to his chosen one, and not long after that, the couple had a daughter. Family life in the new marriage was calmer, but still not without scandals. Sergei still couldn't manage to find a steady job. His wife worked at a factory and earned more, and this oppressed him. He was also oppressed by the recurring urges to squeeze someone's neck and strangle them until the victim stopped struggling. It was getting stronger and stronger until finally Tkach gave in to it. Soon a real trail of deaths began to follow him. As victims, Sergei mostly chose girls and young women between the ages of 8 and 20. However, the maniac claimed in interviews that there was no deliberate victim selection. Whoever happened to cross his path became his target. Tkach called his crimes games with Satan and described himself as a beast with nothing human inside. The maniac chose his victims at random, simply walking along the railroad or the highway. The area was wooded and it was easy to ambush a defenseless child or teenager in a forest belt and later drag the body there as well. Unfortunately, due to YouTube's censorship, I can't show some documentary materials, so I'll leave them in the Strashnoti Telegram channel. Go over, subscribe and watch, the link is under the video. As a rule, Tkach attacked from behind, using his physical strength and not leaving the victim any chance to scream. Grabbing the neck with his hands or throwing a rope around it, he would kill the victim and then commit an act of abuse. As a memento of the crime, Tkach usually took jewelry or a purse, sometimes underwear or cosmetics. According to Sergei, throughout his entire life he never once had a single nightmare about his victims. From his consciousness, what had happened was immediately erased. Almost all of Tkach's crimes were committed while he was under the influence of alcohol. A glass of vodka was a usual dose for him. Tkach could easily drink a whole bottle on a dare and even boasted about it among his drinking buddies, and he would organize competitions to see who could drink faster. According to Tkach, he always won. Knowing the work of criminalists from the inside, Sergei knew exactly their strengths and weaknesses. To avoid leaving traces, he wore work gloves on his hands, and during sexual contact he used a condom. He left the crime scene walking along the railroad ties, trying to trample down his own tracks or cover them with leaves. Sometimes he even returned to the crime scene with the investigators, played the role of a witness, and checked himself to see if he had left any evidence or if any clues would be found. But no clues were found for almost 25 years. In Pavlograd, where more than 100,000 people lived at that time, it was quite easy for Tkach to disappear. Nothing suspecting, the neighbors exchanged gossip with him. The local alcoholics would have a drink at the end of the day and calmly watched as their neighbor Seryoga got on his bicycle and went about his business. No one ever thought that these errands could actually be the search for his next victim. In early November 1984 in Pavlograd, the body of 10-year-old Ola Dmitrienko was found at an abandoned oil factory. The girl was strangled with a rope and then abused. Tkach took a music notebook and a watch on February 13, 1985. 8-year-old Olya Shuvalova's mother, Nadezhda, came to the school. Pavlograd was still shaken by the death of Olya Dmitrienko. Many parents specifically left work early to pick up their children from school and literally walk them home by the hand. Nadezhda came to the school a little early before the lesson was over. Deciding that she would come back in 10 minutes, she stepped away, and when she returned, she found out that Olya had already gone home by herself.
I came back for my child, and the teacher told me I dressed her and she already went home. It's 50 meters away.
Nadezhda chased after her, but the child had vanished. In the apartment where her husband slept after his night shift, the girl had also disappeared. The anxious woman rushed around the apartment and ran outside. There were children's footprints in the stairwell. Maybe it was Olya?
The snow under the windows was untouched, and she once showed me, saying, "Look, Mom, I'm coming home from school, and my backpack is coming home from school too." And that's how she would leave little footprints on her backpack in the snow. And I saw similar footprints.
Nadezhda called for her daughter. Concerned neighbors and her husband emerged from their homes. "My daughter is missing. My daughter is missing," the woman repeated. Everyone in the building started looking for Olya. The girl's body was found in the basement. According to her mother, it was still warm, almost alive. A clear mark of a man's hand was visible on her face. Olya died like the others from strangulation. When the girl stopped breathing, the maniac abused her. The body of a 20-year-old girl with the same signs of violent death was found in the local river in the spring, Pavlograd. I stopped sleeping peacefully. One crime followed another, one after another. Girls and teenage girls died at the hands of a serial maniac. Driven mad by fear, women wrote an open letter to the Pravda newspaper where they told about a maniac operating in their city. The women begged to protect them and their children from the monster who was roaming the area with impunity. Under the influence of public outcry, pressure was put on the Pavlograd investigators both by the authorities and by the public of Pavlograd itself. Children and young girls are dying while the police do nothing. It was necessary to urgently demonstrate at least some kind of result. It was at that time, in order to demonstrate results, that innocent people started being sent behind bars. The first was Igor Ryzhkov.
And one of the victims saw me and said that I looked like the person who attacked her.
The investigation of each of Tkach's crimes in Pavlograd followed the same pattern. All men living in the area who roughly matched the description of the criminal were summoned and questioned, especially those with prior convictions, particularly for sex-related crimes. The survivors, who were often children, were in a state of shock. Even after recovering, many could not remember the criminal's face or provide a description. This significantly complicated the investigation. Igor Ryzhkov turned out to be one of the men questioned in the attempted assault case. At that time, the girl managed to escape. He fit the general description, but that was enough. According to Ryzhkov, they started having heart-to-heart talks with him. The officers pressured him, persuading him to confess because they had a huge number of cases pending. They promised to charge him with only hooliganism if he confessed, discussing only an attempted outrage. The victim was only slightly frightened. He'll sign the documents, serve 15 days, and walk free with a clear conscience, the officers assured him. Ryzhkov agreed, but already at the station it turned out that they were ready to pin several cases on the man at once, including assault. After the confrontation, where the victim identified Ryzhkov, his fate was sealed. Despite the lack of evidence and numerous violations during the investigation, the man was sentenced to the highest punishment, death. He was charged with 2 murders, 3 cases of abuse, and several attempted assaults. In fact, these were all the known crimes of Pavlogradsky. Maniac Ryzhkov felt his world collapsing. In court, he desperately tried to prove his innocence, but the system had sentenced him even before the trial began. He was sent to death row. Only in May of 1988 did the plenum of the Supreme Court of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics finally overturn Igor Ryzhkov's sentence on several counts. The case was sent for further investigation, and the final sentence was 10 years in a high-security colony, 10 years for crimes he did not commit. Almost at the same time as Ryzhkov, Alexander Chudnik and Valery Korshun were also imprisoned. Chudnik served 10 years for crimes he did not commit, and Korshun served 15. Not long after his release, Valery Korshun died from illnesses he had contracted in prison. But at that time, Pavlograd was officially informed the criminal, Igor Ryzhkov, has been caught and awaits punishment for his crime. But already in that same year, 1987, Tkach caught 11-year-old Valia Osinina from the village of Vavarovka. After assaulting the unconscious girl, he left her in the forest, thinking she was dead. But Valia regained consciousness and made it home. The girl remembered her attacker's appearance, allowing investigators to create a composite sketch. The Weaver's next victim was a 17-year-old girl. The death, the assault, the pattern was the same. But Ryzhkov was already in the detention center, so who was committing the crimes then? The investigation answered this question simply. Two maniacs are operating in Pavlograd, with one copying the other's methods. The people couldn't believe there could be two maniacs in the city with the same modus operandi. It seemed impossible. This time, the Pavlograd mothers wrote to Gorbachev, the first secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. In response, an order was issued to the Pavlograd Criminal Investigation Department to find and apprehend the criminal within 10 days. When there were no results after the allotted time, a wave of dismissals swept through the department. Some employees were removed from their positions. A team of investigators from the capital was sent to Pavlograd to show how the work should be done and finally solve the case. But the investigators from the capital didn't succeed either. They returned to Moscow. Sergei Tkach had something to be proud of. He managed to outsmart the entire Soviet investigative system, which had once been so unfair to him. While several hundred agents from the capital were running around the city, he calmly continued committing crimes. Becoming convinced of his own elusiveness, Tkach began committing crimes more often, sometimes literally right under the noses of the investigators.
In one forest plantation, a group of police officers was on duty with a radio, but then they left to have lunch. In general, they were gone for about an hour or two. When they returned, another crime had been committed at that very spot.
Tkach was detained multiple times on suspicion of a crime, but always managed to bribe his way out. He said he had been interrogated repeatedly, including several times by the regional prosecutor's office staff. Police captains. Maybe now they walk these halls as colonels. Should they be ashamed now? That is, I was detained on suspicion of those crimes, but I would bring, he showed with a gesture, money, and he would come up with a version that allowed them to release me right away. Then I would isolate myself, drink at night, and talk to my dog, and then I would do it again. In 1988, the body of Oksana Nevchuk was found in a forest plantation. Someone passing by noticed a man on a bicycle nearby, but couldn't describe him. In that same summer of 1988, Tkach killed a 9-year-old girl and assaulted a 12-year-old. And already in the spring of the following year, he added 2 more 15-year-old girls to his list. In July of 1989, 8-year-old Olya Svetlichnaya rode her bicycle to the store and never came back. The worried parents immediately rushed to the police. That evening, the girl's body was found in a wooded area not far from her home. There were rope marks on her neck and she had been abused. Someone once again noticed a person on a bicycle nearby. It was probably the maniac. Olya's mother, Lyudmila, suffered quietly while her father, Vladimir, vocally blamed the police for everything. He walked around the nearby grove, realizing the maniac would likely return to the crime scene. One day, Vladimir noticed a man on a bicycle and ran after him, but couldn't catch up. Svetlichny swore that he would find the criminal himself, since the police couldn't do it. However, he soon fell under suspicion himself and surveillance was organized on him. But Lyudmila, Vladimir's wife, began to feel pressured as they told her about the maniac's cruelty towards the girl, the victims, and showed her photographs. According to Lyudmila, she was gradually led to believe that the criminal could be her husband. Lyudmila began to suspect and fear her husband. Soon she was almost ready to turn him into the police.
The topic is secret, and for the most part, I have classified it myself. I don't want to lie to you. If you ask something, I'll tell you a little lie. I'm being honest. I know the truth. From the very first step of the investigation into the case of Svetlichnaya. This is, the 4th level of clearance. That is, it's a top secret matter.
One of the surviving victims of the maniac remembered the scent of his cologne, tete-a-tete. A search was conducted in the Svetlichnik house. A bottle of cologne, a starter pistol modified to fire leave rounds, and a knife with a rope were found. Svetlichny was arrested. Torture, threats, and the realization that justice would not help broke the man. In the detention center cell, he took his own life, hanging himself with a noose. Some people were convinced that Svetlishny took his own life because he could not bear the weight of guilt. People came to the Svetlishny family's house wanting to express their feelings. Several attempts were made to set it ablaze. The public condemnation was so strong that Lyudmila Svetlichnaya had to quit her job. For many years, she couldn't sleep peacefully.
Lyudmila told us they became outcasts in Pavlograd. The relatives of the deceased children set the house on fire several times, and Svetlichnaya was fired from her job.
The wife of such a murderer is teaching our children. Goodbye, my friend. Well, goodbye. And after that, I didn't work for 10 years.
Not knowing or not sympathizing with the tragedy, Takash continued to do evil. In 1990, he added 3 victims to his list. In 1993, 4 more. And in 1995, another 3. Mostly the maniac operated in Pavlograd, but in 1995, he committed 1 crime in the Kharkiv region. After drinking vodka, Takach wandered along the poplar alley past the cemetery and he saw a little girl, his hands closed around the child's neck almost automatically. Between 1996 and 2000, Takach claimed another 12 victims. In that same year, his wife got a position as the director of a factory in the city of Polozhi, Zaporizhzhia region. The family moved there and the Pavlograd maniac became the Polozhi maniac. In 2002, Takach killed a 9-year-old girl, Yana Popovich. Her relative, Yakov Popovich, who was only 14 at the time, was accused of her death. The boy lived not far from where the body was found. That was enough to bring charges against him. The teenager was taken to the police right from his class at school. The investigators pressured him. Tell us, confess, or it will be worse. In the end, Yakov wrote a confession and was sent behind bars. First to a juvenile prison, then to an adult facility. In 2005, Sergei Tkach admitted to killing Yana Popovich, but Yakov Popovich stayed imprisoned. He was released only in 2011, after spending more than 8 years behind bars. None of the investigators involved in his case were punished. In 2003, Tkach assaulted Irina Bodrova and later took the life of 15-year-old Valia Skuratova. Shortly after, Olya Prishepa, a 13-year-old girl, also passed away. Vitaly Kaira was arrested on suspicion of attacking Olya. The 23-year-old guy was seen near the place where the body was found.
Zatek throws Rakov down, rolls him over, puts the handcuffs behind his back neatly in the corner, and then starts beating him.
After handcuffing Kair to the radiator, the officers started forcing a confession out of him. When that didn't work, they threatened him. If you don't confess, something will happen to your daughter or your wife. Only then did Kair agree. He was imprisoned in 2004 and released in 2005. Tkach himself talked about this crime, and his DNA matched the DNA found under the nails of Oli Prishepa. But another 3 years passed before Vitaly Kaira was released. The investigators who forced him to testify were sentenced to 5 years in prison with a 3-year probation period. But they were granted amnesty and never spent a day behind bars.
Even now, my mind is still affected. I don't need any friends at all. You can't trust anything. You can't trust anyone, anywhere, with anything, because you'll get thrown in right away.
One of the next victims of the Weavers survived, but she couldn't really say anything except that a man attacked her. The investigators went through the list of suspects again, and this time the choice fell on Nikolai Dimchuk, who knew the Weaver well and worked with him on the collective farm. The 20-year-old man was interrogated as usual, beaten, threatened, and beaten again. Dimchuk also signed a confession and was sent to prison. He served his sentence in the same prison as Kaira, and he was also released. Only in 2008, although Tkach had confessed to this episode back in 2005 and 2004, 13-year-old Vita Kretina suffered at the hands of Tkach. The maniac ambushed the girl in a forest plantation, pinned her down and had already taken off her underwear, but he was scared off by a woman passing nearby. Vita regained consciousness and ran home. She told the investigators that the attacker was a fair-haired man with a bicycle and no mustache. By that time, 3 people were already in prison, unjustly convicted for Tkach's crime. Another convict was executed, and another was sent for compulsory treatment in a psychiatric hospital. The crimes continued, but this didn't seem to bother the prosecutors at all. One of them, who put Nikolai Demchuk behind bars, would later even declare, There are uranium mines all around. The city is full of people with abnormalities. Everyone who ends up behind bars is a maniac. In 2005, another innocent man, Maxim Dmitrenko, was convicted for Tkacha's crime. He also wrote a confession and, according to the court's verdict, received 13 years. Maxim was released from prison only in 2011 after Ukrainian media started demanding it. Then his case was taken up by the president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. But imprisonment undermined Dmitrenko's health and broke him psychologically. During this time, his house was destroyed and his family turned away from him. In 2015, Maxim Dmitrenko passed away before reaching the age of 40. In July 2005, 18-year-old Olha Topalova became the next survivor. She remembered what the attacker looked like, fair-haired with a mustache, and he arrived on a bicycle.
She fought all the way home. She tied her hat to the bike. And I remember that I couldn't breathe, and when I came to, he was right there.
And my swimsuit was over my eyes and everything was even torn. It turns out he checked the pulse on my arms. There was no pulse on either arm. He checked the pulse on my neck and there was none there either. Olya was unconscious for just over 3 hours. It may have been clinical death.
A composite sketch was made based on her description, and Tkach was among the suspects. While under interrogation, he committed 3 additional crimes. His last victim was the neighbor's daughter, Katya Karugia. The 9-year-old girl was sunbathing on the riverbank with her friends. That's where Tkach noticed her. He knew her parents well and even came to her funeral. Along with everyone else, Tkach lamented how inhumanely the maniac had treated her. But someone also noticed Tkach himself and remembered seeing him with Katya and other girls by the river.
He was swimming with the girls in his underwear. I thought they were his granddaughters or something. Well, it turned out they weren't his granddaughters.
The man generally matched the description compiled from the victim's recollections. Operatives visited Sergei's house and heard a phrase that would later be repeated by many Russian-language media outlets. "I've been waiting for you for 25 years." When he was apprehended, the criminal did not resist and willingly walked to the car. They didn't even put handcuffs on him. Tkach quickly confessed, drawing a map of the area and marking the locations of his crimes. Later, jewelry, watches, lipstick, and other belongings of the victims were found in his house. Tkach openly said that he committed the crimes to prove that the investigation was powerless against a criminal. In his final statement, he asked the court to be objective. The animosity was not only towards him, but also employees of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Prosecutor's Office, and Investigation. All of them, he said, were willing accomplices to his crimes, criminalists, operatives, investigators. All of them are ready to turn a blind eye to the evidence and put innocent people behind bars. The cases of Popovich, Dmitrienko, Kairi, and others who were unjustly convicted proved this. Tkach confessed to one crime after another, and soon the number of crimes he admitted to exceeded 30. The maniac claimed responsibility for killing between 80 and 100 girls, but some cases, due to the passage of time, were simply impossible to solve anymore. For many cases of people disappearing in the 80s, criminal investigations were never even opened. For example, Tkach said that he buried the body of one of his victims in the yard of an abandoned house. At that time, they didn't open a case regarding the child's disappearance, but several years later, when the house was bought, the girl's remains were found and identified. Even then, no case was opened as the cause of death couldn't be determined. The same fate befell the body of the girl found in the heating pipeline well in Pavlograd. They didn't open a case. The investigation decided that the girl could have fallen into the well by herself. Tkach, however, claimed that it was his doing. Some of the survivors might have simply not reported it to the police. Abuse is a severe psychological trauma that both the child and the parents want to forget as soon as possible. In addition, families might have been afraid of public condemnation. Besides Polog and Pavlograd, Tkach operated in Simferopol, Dnipro, and the Kharkiv region. Some of his victims may still be listed as missing to this day. While detained, Sergei Tkach closely monitored media coverage about himself through newspapers and television programs. He was upset when he saw that, in his view, he didn't achieve the fame he deserved despite having even more victims than Chikatilo. Tkach really wanted a movie to be made about him, and he was ready to sell his memoirs to Hollywood, but nobody was interested in them. The forensic psychiatric examination confirmed Tkach's sanity. His psychological profile was typical for a maniac: emotional coldness, inability to feel compassion, pronounced egocentrism. At the same time, Tkach was vindictive, irritable, and aggressive. Sergei Tkach was convicted in 2008. Initially, he was charged with 36 deaths and attempted murders and was sentenced to life imprisonment. A year later, 10 more cases were added to the criminal record of the maniac, and he was given a second life sentence. Sergei Tkach's former wives and children did not visit him. However, unexpectedly in 2014, a young woman named Yelena Bulkina got in touch with him. It turned out she saw him on television and became interested. Tkach and Yelena corresponded for about half a year, and in October 2015 she came to visit him. Yelena was 38 years younger than Sergei, but she claimed that she had fallen in love with him despite the age difference and his past. However, it was later revealed that she was also involved with other inmates serving life sentences. Tkach was not the only candidate at all. The visit took place in the presence of guards, separated by glass. At that time, Tkach proposed to Elena and she agreed. Later, Elena said, "Before the visit, the chief invited me to talk. I basically knew what he was going to say, but honestly, the direction the conversation took was quite unexpected. Suddenly I was asked, 'Do you have any living relatives?' Well, I said, 'Some are alive, some have passed away. Why do you ask?' It turns out they had their own theory about why I married a prisoner. Maybe someone close to me suffered at his hands, and I want to take revenge." Yelena married Sergei Tkach and got pregnant on their second visit. In 2016, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizaveta. Sergei Tkach was 64 years old at the time. In his final interview with Ukrainian YouTube journalists in 2017-2018, Sergei Tkach expressed his dream of visiting Lake Baikal with his wife to enjoy the natural scenery.
Lena Station, that's not the end. The railroad, as they say, Lake Baikal, to leave and live for your own pleasure, to raise grandchildren, girls growing up by Baikal. How long will my physical strength last?
He died on November 4th, 2018 in the colony. Neither his wife nor other relatives came for the body. The maniac who dreamed of surpassing Chikatilo was buried by the prison staff.